Today marks the 100th anniversary of the death of the famous women's rights campaigner Emily Davison. Now, you remember, vaguely, like I do from history lessons at school, that Emily Davison died after being trampled under the hooves of King George V's horse at the Epsom Derby. She was attempting to raise awareness of the suffragette movement at the time, and there is some controversy, as we were discussing earlier, as to whether this was a suicide or whether it was just a dreadful and tragic accident. There are some suggestions that have never been proven that she was trying to tie a banner or something to one of the horses. Either way, she died, and she became a flag bearer for the cause of feminism around the world. Mike Buchanan, formerly from Bedford, now runs the Anti-Feminism League, and he campaigns against what he calls militant feminism. And he's on the line now. Good morning to you, Mike.
Yes, good morning, David.
Mike, it's an important anniversary today. I'm sure you'll agree to commemorate the efforts of the suffragette movement to ensure that women were given the right to vote. Can we just get this out of the clear? Well, hang on. Let me just finish the question, Mike. Despite the fact that you run the Anti-Feminism League, you would agree that women should surely have the right to vote. Can we get that out of the way to start with?
Of course, David, of course. But it's a complete myth that the suffragettes were instrumental in women getting the vote when they did, as the writer Steve Moxon outlined in his book The Woman Racket a few years ago.
Why are you anti-feminist, Mike?
Well, for the past 30 years, the only form of feminism of any political importance pardon me, has been militant feminism, which is a hate-driven female supremacist movement. It's anti-family, it's anti-marriage, and through manipulating the institutions of the state, it attacks almost every pillar of a civilized society to disadvantage men and advantage women, most notably feminists themselves. Now, men pay 72% of the income tax collected in the UK, women only 28%, yet the state assaults men to give privileges to women on many, many fronts.
But I know many women who would describe themselves as feminists, but they're not militant.
No, but they have no importance in terms of politics and economics, David. The only, you know, when you know, this is the distinction between, if you like, old school feminism and militant feminism. Militant feminism, you know, you think of people like Harriet Harman, is all about grinding men's faces into the dirt. Basically, it is all about advantaging women. You know, in all fields, quite regardless of merit. So if you take, for example, you know, they often say that the domination at the top of business and politics is down to discrimination against women. It's complete nonsense. In the year 2000, the renowned sociologist Catherine Hackim produced a paper outlining what she called preference theory. And her research showed that while 4 in 7 British men are work-centred, only 1 in 7 British women are. So you would expect a preponderance of men at the top of business, politics, and everywhere else as a result of that alone. I'm
trying to struggle I'm struggling with what makes you so angry, Mike, because there is a received wisdom, I think, now amongst most people. You're going to disagree with me, I'm sure, that women should have equal rights in society.
But they have, David. That's exactly the point.
Well, not when you look in our city boardrooms, when you look at top levels of management, when you look at senior corporations. That's not the case, is it?
I've just explained to you that 4 times as many men as women are work-centred, and the received wisdom you talk about is actually received stupidity.
So when, for example, News Corp, for example, to cite one corporation this week, held their shareholders meeting, there was a photograph in all the press of the board of directors of 30 men sitting on a stage. Is that right or wrong?
Well, so what? I mean, you know, if women are as good at business, where are the female-led News Corp equivalents with 30 women?
Do you think that by labelling yourself as an anti-feminist, the impression you give is that you believe that men are superior to women?
Absolutely not. I mean, anybody who understands anything that I do, David, will know that's not the case. I lead the political party Justice for Men and Boys, and I defy anybody to find anything on any of my 3 blogs or any of my 3 books which suggest that men are superior to women.
But you believe that women absolutely should have equal rights in the workplace?
Of course. But equality of opportunity, you know, I mean, for equality of opportunity, which women have had for decades, will only translate into equality of outcome as and when women work hard enough There's nothing stopping women back. It's 34 years, David, since we had our first female prime minister. What woman in that time hasn't understood that if she works hard enough, and is focused enough, that she will get as far as men?
Well, women would argue that we don't have in this society, as is in place in other countries, the right environment, perhaps, and the right support, particularly when it comes to childcare, to allow them to achieve.
But why should society and businesses bend over backwards? At the end of the day, women, when a woman, David, says she's looking for a better work-life balance, do you think she's looking for more work or more life? The reality is that women want more from their lives, and the men who get to the top of major businesses are workaholics. Who have a work ethic that very, very few women have.
So if a woman decides she wants to have a family,
yep,
then she should stay at home. Is that what we're getting at here?
Absolutely not. But I'm saying an awful lot
because
of women,
that's what stops most women reaching the top, is that they decide to have a family, and overwhelmingly most women take up that responsibility in the home still.
Well, yes, but that's hardly unnatural, is it? I mean, there was a survey recently of 1,200 women over 25 in full-time employment. And over 80% said that they would give that up tomorrow to become a housewife and look after children.
All right. What one thing would you change to balance out equality between men and women?
One thing? I think the first area that I think is an absolute obscenity is the state failing to ensure that fathers, that after relationship breakdowns, that fathers get reasonable access to their children. I think it's emotional abuse of men and their children that.
So it's fathers' rights, but you change absolutely nothing for women at all.
Well, in our consultation document, David, we have 18 areas in which the state assaults men and boys through the action.
No, my question is, you wouldn't change anything for women at all?
I think women have got everything. There is not one way in which they're discriminated against.
Thank you very much. Mike Buchanan, formerly from Bedford, runs the Anti-Feminism League. Speaking up to us today on the 100th anniversary of the death of the famous women's rights campaigner, Emily Davison. Women have it all. There's nothing he would change. Can women really have it all? Interesting conversation we were having just now about feminism with Mike Buchanan, formerly from Bedford, who runs the Anti-Feminism League. He says that women do have it all. There's no need to change anything really at all. It's absolutely fine. Today marks the 100th anniversary of the death of the famous women's rights campaigner, Emily Davison. Davison died after being trampled under the feet of King George V's horse at the Epsom Derby. She was attempting to raise awareness of the suffragette movement at the time. And did you hear our conversation earlier this morning with a man who runs the anti-feminism movement? Yeah, really. It's an interesting conversation. Maybe we'll clip a bit of that and play it for you just after 8 o'clock this morning as we'll carry on talking about this. We're asking today, 100 years on from that Emily Davison moment, can women really have it all? What are your experiences in your life of that old menace, the work-life balance? Can women really have it all? As we were just hearing there in the news, marks the 100th anniversary of the death of the famous feminist campaigner, Emily Davison. She died after being crushed under the hooves of King George V's horse at the Epsom Derby. She was protesting against the fact that women couldn't vote at the time. Earlier, where have you been? We've been here for hours now. Days we've been sitting in here. Earlier we heard from Mike Buchanan from Bedford. He used to live in Bedford. He runs the Anti-Feminism League. He's an anti-feminist. Oh, yes. That was a spicy conversation. We'll hear a clip of that in just a second. We're asking today, though, it's a simple question, and if your life is anything like mine or my marriage and there's problems of work-life balance that we face every day, we're asking, can women really have it all? The idea that you can run a family, be settled in your relationship or your marriage and work at the same time. That's what feminism has moved on to now, hasn't it? Generally speaking, there are pockets where it's there is still a huge inequality, I think, between men and women, but largely it's true that men and women have equality. But moved on now, I think, to can women really have it all? Feminism turned out to be a bit of a dumb sell after all these years. What do you think? And we're talking about feminism this morning, whether women can really have it all 100 years on since the death of suffragette Emily Davison. Can women have it all? Karen Burnage has been in contact on Facebook to say, If it wasn't for the suffragettes, women would have no rights and no votes. From Helen Roberts, what a selfless act this woman did for what she believed in. I'm sure she didn't mean to die. What a courageous woman, though. And Jane Johnson on Facebook. That's why it's so important to vote at elections. No excuse. You can always apply for a postal vote if you can't get to the polling station. Thank you very much, Jane. It's facebook.com/BBC Three Counties Radio. Let's talk more about this now, though. Davison died. Emily Wilding Davison died 100 years ago today after being crushed under the hooves of King George V's horse at the Epsom Derby. Earlier, we heard from Mike Buchanan from Bedford. Now, Mike runs something called, bear with me on this, the Anti-Feminism League. Here's a clip of what he had to say earlier.
For equality of opportunity, which women have had for decades, will only translate into equality of outcome as and when women work hard enough. There's nothing stopping women back. It's 34 years, David, since we had our first female Prime Minister. What woman in that time hasn't understood that if she works hard enough, and is focused enough, that she will get as far as men?
Well, women would argue that we don't have in this society, as is in place in other countries, the right environment, perhaps, and the right support, particularly when it comes to childcare, to allow them to achieve.
But why should society and businesses bend over backwards? At the end of the day, women, when a woman, David, says she's looking for a better work-life balance, do you think she's looking for more work or more life? The reality is that women want more from their lives, and the men who get to the top of major businesses are workaholics, who have a work ethic that very, very few women have.
I think what he was trying to say is that women can't have it all. But let's speak to Holly Combe now, who's a columnist for the feminist website, The F Word. Hello, Holly.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Did you hear what Mike Buchanan was saying there?
Yes, I did, yeah. I mean, I think the not having it all question is a bit of a red herring, because, of course, nobody can have it all. You can't do everything in life, whether you're a man or a woman. And I think that kind of not having it all phrase, I mean, wasn't it a woman from Cosmopolitan that coined it?
Yes.
I think it's very tied up with consumerism and sort of trying to tick all the boxes and do lots of different things. And I don't really think that helps anyone, sort of men or women. But going back to what he was saying about positive discrimination, I mean, I would point out not all men work hard. I mean, the way he sort of framed it, anyone would think that women were we're all lazy and we all just want work-life balance and all this sort of thing. And actually, the reality is that it's a mixture between the genders, and the point is that women shouldn't have to be exceptional to get where a lot of men go. And yes, sure, the people who are right at the top or a chief executive, they might have worked really hard to get there. It might be that they've got quite a lot of privilege as well, which is another issue. But the point is that the people who are just doing everyday jobs, who aren't actually in those positions, there is a mixture, and not everybody works hard and not everybody is lazy. So I think, there is still a case of positive discrimination. Whether or not it works, I think, is another matter, because, of course, when people are resentful about it, I think it does have quite a counterproductive effect. But I sort of ask, well, what are we supposed to do if we don't have equality?
Where are we with feminism now? Because when I hear the word now, it feels to me a little bit outdated, as though it was something we discussed in the 70s and the early 80s, but that we've moved on in the last 10 years plus. I work at 3 different radio stations. I have 3 bosses. They're all women. I've worked for endless female bosses over the years, and the idea now that women don't have equality seems a bit out of date to me.
Well, I think we don't. I mean, I think that's the point, that different people will look at reality in different ways. And I think on an individual level, I think that it is possible for an individual woman to become successful. Obviously, Margaret Thatcher was used as an example, and there's lots of women bosses. And obviously, things have got much better. But that doesn't mean to say that it's got better for all women. Again, that doesn't mean that all women will want to have, sort of very high-powered jobs. But I think, it isn't the case that we actually have equality. I think that the term feminism, I think sometimes people see it as being sort of very focused on women, and that it's not about equality and sort of looking at gender stereotypes for men. But I think it is, because it comes from the mindset that, we do still have the hangover of sort of women being expected to follow men, being expected to be in the background. I mean, we don't have equal numbers of men, for an example, changing their name when they get married. We still have phrases like, you run like a girl. And I think until we sort of see those things change, I think, women don't have full equality. Yes, things...
What's wrong with the idea of taking a man's name, though, when you get married? Is that such a bad...
I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think, so many of my friends and family have done that, so I wouldn't berate a woman for doing it. But I think, the fact is there aren't as many men doing it as women. Well, why is that? That is a hangover, obviously, from patriarchal ideas. And I think while it's important not to berate people for the choices that they make, I think, the fact that that isn't sort of evenly spread, I think there is something in that.
All right, interesting. Thank you very much. Nice to talk to you, Holly. Let's chat again another time. It's lovely to talk to you. Thank you very much. Holly Combe, consultant for the feminist website The F Word. What do you think?